going to call to order the Planning Commission of the City of Canby. Tonight is Monday, June 23rd, 2014. The time is now just after 7 o'clock. We have 4 planning commissioners present, which certainly constitutes a quorum, and we will then do business. First item on the agenda is input from citizens on non-agenda items. Is there anyone from the public that wants to give input on items that are not on the agenda? Not seeing any. We will move to the potential approval of Planning Commission minutes from June 9th, which are not in our packets, so we will not be considering those tonight. Therefore, we move to the next item of business on our agenda, which is a public hearing. We have an applicant who is requesting approval of Eli Estates, a 1.65 acre subdivision for 10 lots located at 1550 South Ivy Street on the east side of South Ivy Street, just north of Southeast 16th Avenue, and zoned R 1.5 medium density residential, subdivision number 14-03. All quasi-judicial public hearings have some recitations that need read, and I will read those into the record now. The matter that is before this hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please be prepared to step forward to the microphone at the appropriate time. State your name, mailing address, and interest in the matter. Please be sure to sign in on the testimony sheet. For those people other than the applicants that are interested in testifying as either proponents or opponents, please sign in on the sheet or speak up when called for testimony. For longer presentations, proponents or opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposing may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each, the opponents will be given 5 minutes each, and those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become part of the public record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations, which the person believes to apply to this decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision makers and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it's only to concur with prior testimony. At this time, I'm going to ask, is there any member of this hearing body who has a conflict of interest in this matter? If so, please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing in the present matter.
I don't have a conflict of interest, but my daughter is a friend and babysitter of both the Netters and the McRobies, but will have no effect on my decision.
Okay, and I have none. Have there been any ex parte contacts? If so, any member of this commission that's had ex parte contacts with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contacts at this time.
No.
Nope, I've had none. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any of the commissioners regarding conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts? Okay, not seeing any. The public hearing will then be conducted as follows. First, we'll have the staff report. Second, we'll have any questions from the commission to the staff. Then we'll open a public hearing for testimony. The applicant will have not more than 15 minutes. Any other proponents will have not more than 5 minutes each. Opponents will have not more than 5 minutes each. Neutral parties will have not more than 5 minutes each. And rebuttal by the applicant, if necessary, will have not more than 10 minutes. Then we'll close the public testimony, have any additional questions from the commission, and then we'll move to discussion and deliberation. Are there any questions about the procedure for today's hearing? Not seeing any? Brian, are you be presenting today?
I sure
Mr.
will.
Brown? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting. This 10-lot subdivision is located on South Ivy. Our screen turned blue here just recently. We don't know why. It was white a while ago. So sorry about the difficulty seeing it. We've gotten used to doing subdivisions that have low-density residential zoning. This particular tract has R1.5, which is medium-density zoning. It's a smaller area, about 1.65 acres involved. And it does have some frontage on Ivy Street, which involves the county's jurisdiction on the road. But we actually are utilizing the City of Canby's street improvement standards for an arterial roadway, and the county was satisfied that it was meeting their requirements as well. This is a look at the subdivision, and there's access that's coming from 16th Avenue, which is off of the actual subdivision down to the south, comes up Juniper, and then it melds in with 15th Place, and that's extended westward and then turns north around the little knuckle. And then if you look straight to the west, you'll see that there is a private tract. I think it's called Tract A. And that is serving as both a public and private access easement to several lots that will be on that private drive. And it also serves a dual purpose for pedestrian access over through and connecting to the sidewalk that will be up and down South Ivy, but it does not provide any vehicular connection. And it is a private road. This drawing actually shows the sidewalks that will be constructed as well in dark, following along the streets. So you're going to end up with a 6-foot wide curb-tight sidewalk adjacent to Ivy running north and south to the west. And then you also have those 6-foot sidewalks actually separated on the internal street that does its configuration there with a planter strip next to the curb on the internal street. This has a couple details, and it shows the local street, the typical section, and in that it does show the planter strip next to the curb and then your 6-foot sidewalk. And I guess it's not this one, but it shows the South Ivy section that shows the 6-foot sidewalk that's going to be curb tight. And on Ivy, that is following the pattern that was set in Dinsmore Estates Phase 1, which is to the south. And they also established with that subdivision a wall along South Ivy that starts along to shield the residential subdivision from that kind of county highway or arterial street. And so they're tending to have that wall continue up along this subdivision as well in a similar manner. The only difference is they put a sidewalk, 5-foot sidewalk in, and this is transitioning to a 6-foot wide sidewalk. But other than that, it's just continuing what was started to the south on Ivy.
They want to just do bump outs for the street tree ordinance?
They're not doing street trees. That was a big debate at the pre-app meeting. Looking at both sides of Ivy from here on north to 13th, the west side is completely developed, and it's a curb tight. I think that's a curb tight sidewalk. I'm trying to remember now. But it's not going to change since it's fully developed. And on this side, it was determined by all involved that they weren't going to attempt to do additional right-of-way and such to be able to accommodate street trees. And so if there are any street trees, they'll be on the inside edge of the curb-tight sidewalk, depending on how the rest of this develops with lots. But the fact that they're putting a wall, continuing this wall along there, there's not going to be room for street trees. I mean, so I don't know if that answers your question, but it's not proposed right now to do that. And it was primarily because additional right-of-way would be needed, and that would be different than the Dinsmore pattern that was started to the south.
Let me rephrase my question. It's no secret that I'm not a fan of the street tree ordinance in general, but if it's in the code, I want to know how they meet it or where the exception lies.
I'll have to think about that, and I'll see if I can get back with you
Okay.
exactly what that would be. This... so small. I guess this was showing you the details on the sidewalk that's in Tract A and how they're going to put bollards in that to help slow the bicycles down. But again, there's no vehicular traffic going through that means of access in that location. A couple of the topics I've already brought up, a couple just wanted to make sure you were aware of the wall that was going to be constructed along the Ivy Street frontage, just to match the other. And then the fact that they're building a wall is important in the fact that they've indicated that they are not going to have any homeowners association. And in this day and age, that's kind of unique, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to do when you don't have to do one. They will probably undoubtedly still have CC&Rs, but there's no open space planned in this subdivision, so there's nothing that needs to be taken care of. Drainage is going to be handled in the public road through a new dry well that will be for street runoff. Each individual lot has to manage their own drainage runoff on site. That's city ordinance that they do that. And so the issue becomes who's going to take care of the wall over time, and who's going to take care of Tract A, which has the private road in it. And so you may want to make sure that the applicant clarifies that, but my understanding is, at least in our conditions, we're proposing that the wall be taken care of by lots 3 through 8, which are adjacent to the wall. And then the same similar thing would happen with the maintenance of the private road access. It would be taken care of by those lots that are actually using it and front on it. And so there would have to be extra agreements drawn up to take care of that situation, since there's no homeowners to do that. There will be half-street improvements made to the arterial street that it's adjacent to, and it does not require any additional right-of-way by agreeing to the curb-tight sidewalk. And they will be required to put the necessary traffic signage and such internally, and that's something we always check on at the construction stage, the final plat stage. But they will be, the developer takes care of those signage needs inside the subdivision. Infill standards do not apply to any of the lots in this subdivision. There's not 2 existing houses on either side of any of the lots that are within 25 feet. And I already mentioned how they're handling the stormwater. They actually...
Let me pause it for 1 second on that. I see where you get that in your report, and you put that in your report that it's not an infill home by definition. And you put something afterwards that I didn't quite understand. You used the quote of an infill project.
I think...
and that's not defined in our code. I wasn't sure what you're talking about.
I think the language that's in the report was basically the common nomenclature for infill. This development actually could be considered infill development in the common terminology of the word because it's got surrounding development around it. So I think that's all that was meant in the report. I didn't actually draft this report.
Okay.
But it doesn't meet the code's definition for infill, which is very important because it has some requirements for step-up height requirements that can potentially limit a two-story house from being in it. Street lighting plans, we've had them done a couple different ways. The Canby Utility actually creates those street lighting plans, and they insist on not doing that until they're absolutely positive the layout is approved, because they don't want to waste their time. And so that will be done at the construction stage if this subdivision is approved, and it'll meet the normal spacing standard that Canby has always had, and Canby Utility has dictated on where those will be. I don't recall if there was any discussion at the pre-app whether they might use LED lighting or not, because we've had subdivisions moving towards those. We don't have any requirement, but we encourage them to use the most energy efficient lighting.
Also, something else I wanted to bring you, Brian. I noticed this last month too, that this statement was in one of the staff findings, and I believe that, I can't remember for sure if we addressed it last month or not, but I wanted to, and that was that it said the Planning Commission had recently interpreted that this chapter, outdoor lighting standards, is not applicable to subdivisions. And I thought the statement that I either thought of last month or said last month was that that wasn't what we had found. We had found that it was not applicable to street lighting. If we recalled, we said because CUB does street lighting,
Right.
that we weren't going to have the outdoor lighting standards apply to street lighting. If it should be that there was something inside the subdivision that was outdoor lighting, then
Okay.
it would apply. And I
Okay.
wanted to make sure.
We'll try to make sure
that's what
we remember that in the future. And there might be some chance, in fact, we talked about pedestrian lighting in a pathway once.
Right,
so
pathways, or if there
in that
happened to be
case.
a,
Otherwise, there wouldn't be any other lighting, but there might be lighting associated with pedestrian
you could
pathway.
theoretically have a parking area in a subdivision or something that's lit. Maybe that'd be a street, but hypothetically, it
Yeah.
could, you know.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
kept getting repeated. I wanted to make sure that we were clear on that.
There was a last-minute change that I think the applicant will probably mention, so I put that in here, and see if it's light enough just so it doesn't get overlooked. Just this weekend, there was an agreement. I can go back. If you look at the south boundary of this plat, it's a straight line. And if I go back up to the original plan that was submitted, oops, it's on this one, you see the jog along the southern boundary? Well, there's a little tract C that is a part of the adjacent subdivision down below. It was originally part of a kind of buffer area, an open space that was part of that other subdivision, but they replatted this portion of it. And in that replatting, there was an agreement to place this area in its own tract, and the developer that replatted this had in mind the possibility of trading that piece of property, selling it, whatever, when this property developed up here. And they finally were able to come to an agreement this weekend. And so staff thinks it's a really great thing. This little narrow piece is being planned to be attached to the lots that's adjacent to it there in that subdivision. So in order to make that happen, that tract will be replatted and be a part of this new Eli subdivision as it's being proposed. We didn't
About 20 feet or 25 feet?
I don't remember how wide it is. I didn't check on that, but the applicant probably knows and can ask you
You're just
about
talking
that.
about the tract C
That's right.
only.
One of these drawings, when you look closer, you can see the track C labeled and
Well,
such.
it's 3,240 square feet, so if I'm reading this correctly. So,
But as it is configured now in the replatted subdivision to the south, that tract has no real purpose any longer on the new plat that was filed to record. It just says the developer retains control over it. So I wanted you to be aware of that. And
And that has no drainage purpose
no.
similar to the one that is on the opposite side of the street?
Apparently
Is
not.
that right? Okay.
It does not. It is in the same alignment, but apparently has no drainage function. It was more of an open space.
Okay.
So staff's, with the conditions that have been outlined in this staff report, we believe that the requirements for approval are met. And so we would recommend that the Planning Commission approve this subdivision per staff's recommendation. And I'm open to any other questions.
Is there any questions for Mr. Brown
And if
before we
you,
get to the applicants?
if you could tell me what your question earlier was again,
Oh,
because I've
sure.
already forgotten.
I was just, that street tree ordinance that council passed this winter, I was wondering if that would apply to this situation or if there'd be an exemption.
Well, I can tell you that the street tree ordinance does actually apply in terms of internal to this subdivision. They will be paying $200 per linear frontage for the number of trees based upon the linear frontage they have adjacent to their internal public streets. So from that standpoint, yes.
And that last subdivision we did on the other side of 13th, further down, had to comply with the street tree ordinance,
Right.
and they had to do bump outs. And so I'm wondering here, you know, how
That
this one-
discussion about that was specifically to match the existing neighborhood. It was brought up, it was a written comment that was submitted on that subdivision by someone in the adjacent neighborhood that said, hey, they're not proposing the same pattern that has been set in the other additions along here, and so they wanted to make sure that that was done. And so staff discussed that with the developer, and at the meeting, he indicated that he agreed that he would provide the additional private easement on the back of the lots to make that, so the wall could be pushed back further, so there would be room for those street trees to handle. Something like that could potentially be done on this. That pattern was not started on the subdivision to the south, and that was one of the strong arguments on the other one, to continue the pattern that was started. So it could be done, though. So I think maybe I've answered your question now, so.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Brown before we go to the applicant? Okay. Next, we will have a statement from the applicant or applicant's representative.
Laney, did you want to bring up?
Good evening, Chair Smith and Planning Commissioners. I'm Pat Sissel, Sissel Engineering, 375 Portland Avenue, Gladstone. I'm here tonight with Ed Netter, the applicant, and Travis McRobbie, the property owner, is here as well. This subdivision is probably familiar to you from the Dinsmore Estates subdivision application that came before you just a while back. The subdivision is located here. The proposed Dinsmore Estates subdivision is in this area. The property has one new house on it built in, I think, 2007 here in the corner that's proposed to stay, and an older home and a couple outbuildings that are proposed to be removed from the site. In Dinsmore Estates Phase 1, there is a masonry wall out front. It's 60 inches high with 66-inch high columns. And along the frontage of this property, hidden behind a lot of vegetation, there's a similar wall that matches the one in Dinsmore Estates. Masonry, 60 inches high with 66-inch high columns. And the plan was to, and then these are just straight walls, there's no articulation for street trees in any of them. And the plan with this development was to construct a similar wall along the frontage here that would tie these together and make it look like a seamless frontage along that part of South Ivy. These walls are very close in color. They're not exactly the same color, and the intent would be to use a very similar masonry here that would complement both and tie it across there. And the next slide, please. The proposal is to have one break in the wall in this location that would allow people to get from the internal city streets through here out to the South Ivy street frontage. For now, there would just be sidewalks from here to here. There's no sidewalks from this line north, but there will be in time as this area develops. There is sidewalk on the opposite side of the street in front of Hope Village. This plan that you're looking at was the original plan that showed this tract C being here, and it was something that I think both parties were interested in getting together and making this happen, but they had to be in the same place at the same time to talk about it, number one, and then number two, they had to agree on a price. And they were finally able to do that this weekend. And can I have the next slide, Brian? And so the proposal is to just make a straight line. When this was replatted recently, what was done here was there was originally 8 lots in this area, and it was replatted as 7. And when he replatted it, he just straightened off the rear yards. And so the two property owners have come to an agreement to that this will now become part of the subdivision, and it really makes for a much better lot layout on this side of the property. This lot 10, this corner lot, which was pretty narrow on the original plan, is now a 6,300 square foot lot, and it would allow a 39-foot wide home to be built, even with the side yard setback that's required on the street side along Juniper Street here. The plan, the street layout was put together to tie into Juniper Street that exists in Dinsmore Estates, and to work with the street layout that's been approved in Dinsmore Estates 2, and a connection to Ivy couldn't be made here, so the street turns north with this knuckle, and the thought is that it would be extended and connected into 14th Place. It would allow for future development of some lots here. The Dinsmore house, the original Dinsmore house, is a very nice home. I don't think it's going to go anywhere for quite some time, but it would allow, if many years down the road, if this were to be partitioned, then lots could also take access off this internal street. The separation from 16th Avenue up to Ivy it's kind of in that no man's land where it's too long to not have an access, but not long enough to permit an access. I think the logical place for an access to come through here would be right through this house, and as I said, it's a very nice house. I don't think it's going anywhere for quite some time. So the thought was to put this connection in here, and this will allow for future development of the rear of these parcels if it happens in time. The Ivy Street frontage will be, Brian was mostly correct in that it would be a continuation of the improvements in Dinsmore. The street actually has to get 1 foot wider because of a change in code that's happened from in the last few years. So there will be a 1 foot wide, a 1 foot jog in the curb line, and then the sidewalk will also get 1 foot wider. So the back of the walk along the frontage of this parcel will be 2 feet behind the back of sidewalk in the Dinsmore Estate subdivision.
So you're saying the Dinsmore is 5 and yours would be 6?
Yes. And the curb is 22 feet from center line in Dinsmore, and now it needs to be 23 to meet the current code. So that leaves 6 inches of room behind the sidewalk to the face of the wall, which obviously isn't enough room to plant street trees. What the applicant is willing to do, he'd rather not jog the wall, just because the roots end up going underneath the wall around those jogs, and the walls end up cracking over time. But there will be a 15-foot wide street side setback on that side of the street, and if you feel that trees are necessary along Ivy Street, he'd be willing to put 2 trees on lot 4, maybe 2 trees behind the wall, and then on lot 5 as well, 2 trees behind the wall as well, in that 15-foot street setback. Another thing that Brian mentioned was the maintenance of the private driveway. Maintenance of the private driveway would be handled by a maintenance agreement recorded with the plat that would state that the lots 3 through 8, the lots that take access from the driveway, would be responsible for maintaining it. Maintenance agreements are a common way to handle responsibilities like that on plats without having to create a homeowners association. The problem with homeowners associations, if any of you are in them, that when you have a few number of lots, is getting people willing to run the homeowners association and be responsible for it and serve on that board. With 10 lots, it'd be really difficult to have a effective homeowners association here. So there was really no reason to have to create one, and so we just felt that handling it by maintenance agreement would be the way to handle it.
Excuse me. How do you enforce the maintenance agreement? I assume you have 4 or 5 lots. There's like 3 through 8. Is that what it was?
Yes.
So you have 5 lots that are going to be responsible for the maintenance of that walkway. I'm just curious as to how that is enforced. You have to, even though you have an agreement, if there's a dispute between neighbors or there's a file that can get.
There's a document it's a legal document that's recorded with the plat, and in that document it explains that if a party isn't cooperating or parties aren't cooperating, how it's enforced. It wouldn't involve the city. It would be a dispute between neighbors, and typically it involves litigation, unfortunately. But
and the wall is going to be maintained the same under the same.
No, the wall would be maintained just like a fence along your property line. The portion of the wall that is located along lot 4 will be the responsibility of lot 4 to maintain, and along lot 5 would be the responsibility of lot 5. So we're just talking about the private driveway here and the little bit of sidewalk at the end of the private driveway that would be shared maintenance.
Does that requirement get the buyer at the time of closing and whatnot, the paperwork, is that where it gets brought forth so that there's no surprises down the road?
Yes, as I said, it gets recorded with the plat, so it's a document that's there at the time of closing. It would be laid out in front of them.
Okay.
Is that true for the wall too? Because I think that's what you're asking.
Yes, more so. Yeah, I was talking about the wall.
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the driveway.
No, the wall.
that could probably be handled in the same manner.
That was staff's concern too, is that we've run into the situation in Willow Creek where everybody claims I had no idea that we were responsible for the wall
Yeah.
because it's
Right.
adjacent to our property. But, so it seems like something that'd be worthwhile to try to solve in some manner so that the potential buyer of those lots know that walls don't last forever.
Well, I think, if you wish, I think we could put a maintenance agreement together for the walls. It clearly spells it out, that it's the maintenance, the long-term maintenance of the wall along Lot 4 is the responsibility of Lot 4. And
Because I could
have
see
that
down the road
recorded.
where the property owner would try to throw it back at the city, and the city would say, no, it's not us, it's you, and then here we go back and forth, and so I'd feel better if we had it really in black and white right up front.
I think we could do that if you want a condition of approval concerning a maintenance agreement for that we wouldn't have an issue with that. Regarding lighting, I would expect the lighting in this subdivision will be LID, just because I just got the lighting plans today for the Dinsmore 2 and Canby Utility laid out the lighting assuming LED lighting for the Dinsmore Estate subdivision.
Did you say LED?
Sorry, yes, LED. I said LID, I think.
Question before we get too far from what we were just talking about. How is parcel 2 accessed? Where is that? That's in here, right?
Lot 1.
Cross-reference my map here. No, lot 2, let's see. You split these two in half, right? Is this lot 2 up here?
Yes,
How is that getting accessed?
it would get accessed off the public street right here. And
Okay.
Lot 3 would get accessed off the public street too.
Oh, okay.
Now, Lot 3 is included in the maintenance of this driveway because they could theoretically have some side or rear yard access to get into the back of their lot. This driveway will be, it will be curbed on this one side. The curbing will end here for the driveway into Lot 4, and it'll be painted red, marked no parking, fire lane. Because the lots are fairly narrow, we decided to leave the curb off of the south side because it would end up getting broken by all these driveways on that side.
And the shared access there is going to be the frontage for those lots, the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, no, 6, 7, 8? Is that going to be?
Yes.
For that one, it'll be the frontage for that lot and for these ones?
Yes.
Okay.
Regarding the width of track C, it is 18.11 feet is what that difference was.
Okay.
And rather than put this area into just these lots, we moved all these lot lines west a little bit, spread that area out amongst all 6 lots. We made this lot much wider, so this can support Lot 10 can support a 39-foot wide building envelope. Lot 9 could also support a 39-foot wide, and then lots 5, 6, 7, and 8 can support 33-foot wide homes. So there'd be some standard, some similarity in the widths.
And if you know the answer to this question, what's the elevation difference between this area and this house area over here?
I don't know the exact elevation difference.
Right now it's pretty flat, but I know when you build houses, you gotta dig up dirt and it usually raises it 2-3 feet or something.
It falls this direction, and I want to say it falls about 4 feet. The low point is actually this corner of the site back here.
My question then is what's the plans for water retention in this area? I've seen a lot of times when you have a street stubbed, and if you've got any slope at all, it floods water into.
The low point of the street system will be back here.
Okay.
So this will actually drain back to this point, and this will drain to here.
And the stormwater?
There'll be a pair of catch basins in this low
Okay.
area.
Okay.
So the intent was to try to keep all the water focused into the middle of the site. And there'll be a new dry well installed in Juniper Street right down here, and all the water will go to that dry well.
Okay.
There are dry wells down here to drain to, but this is a privately maintained storm drain system in this area here, and so this subdivision can't drain through a privately maintained facility. So it'll have its own dry well to serve this development, and that will include accepting runoff off of Ivy Street and bringing it back here too. Next slide, please. Just following the discussion on the utilities, here's the dry well we talked about. You can see the storm drain, catch basins right in this area, go to a pollution control manhole, and then down to a dry well. The water system will just connect onto the water at the end of Juniper Street here. It'll connect with the water in 15th Place and bring those two lines to here. Canby Utility did not want to loop the water system through the driveway. But sanitary sewer will come from Ivy Street through the driveway to this intersection. It'll pick up the home. Sewer in Dinsmore Estates is going this way. So this is kind of a high point on the sewer system. From here, one line will go that way, one line is coming this way, and another line is coming that way. So that's kind of the termination of 3 sanitary sewer lines right at that intersection. Next slide, please, Brian. This is the blow up of the driveway, and this is the intersection of the private sidewalk at the end of the private driveway here, and its connection with the public sidewalk. You see, we've got masonry walls and columns on the north and south, and then we proposed 3 bollards here, and the idea of the bollards is we wanted to slow primarily bicycles down. If anyone is riding their bike up here, we wanted to slow them down before they just ended up out on Ivy Street. With this wall being here, they won't be able to see people walking up and down Ivy Street. That was one concern. The other concern was just jumping the curb and ending up out in Ivy. We talked over ideas with Public Works Department. Our original thought was to put a couple swinging gates on here, but even though it was a private wall, Public Works felt that gates would end up being the city's responsibility in time if they failed to function, and they felt that the bollards was probably a better idea there. So there won't be a long-term maintenance responsibility with that, but it'll have the same effect of slowing people down and providing some safety. As far as the wall, you can see it here. It's a 60-inch high masonry wall is what's proposed, with 66-inch high columns spaced at the same intervals as in Dinsmore Estates. Next slide, Brian. So again, this is just showing the overall plan here. We've straightened, at the request of the neighboring property owner, we've straightened out the southern property line and included Track C in the development. And I think it's a development that fits well, provides 9 new R1 lots, which more than doubles the R1 lots available in the city of Canby, because the only ones that are available in the city right now are these, or excuse me, the R1.5 lots. I said R1. These are the only R1.5 lots available in Canby, and this is more than doubling the available R1 land supply. As far as the conditions of approval, I just had one condition that I wanted to discuss, and that was condition number 39. I mentioned this to Brian before the meeting. We've had this condition before. It states that the applicant has 1 year to record the plat with Clackamas County. That condition, that's actually in error. The city code section 16.68.020 states that a plat needs to be submitted to the city within 1 year, and that the applicant can get extensions beyond that. So I just wanted to have that condition reworded to conform with section 16.68.020. And that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for this gentleman?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other proponents that would like to speak in favor of this application? Okay, not seeing any other proponents. Are there any opponents that would like to speak against this application? Not seeing any opponents. Is there anyone that is neutral that has any comments? Okay, with no further testimony, we will not have a rebuttal. If that's okay, unless you really want to get back up there. So we'll close the public hearing part of today's hearing, and we will go to questions. Do any of the commissioners have any remaining questions for staff before we move to deliberation?
I just had some concerns about the maintenance agreements on the walkway and the fence. So we can't, that Mr. Surlett had mentioned. So that would be the only concern that I have.
Yeah, I might mention that, I think we're going a long ways towards the fact that we're recognizing that these can be long-term maintenance, and so often they're never thought about, never brought out and discussed. And so with the fact that we're aware of this and that we're doing something about it is going to increase our chances of success. And when you think about it in a planning sense, it's one reason why sometimes we should be concerned about private roads, because the city has no control over them when you utilize them. And so the only thing we can do is make sure that the people responsible have a legal document that tells them so that they can fight amongst themselves if they ever need to make sure that it gets taken care of. Because someday, instead of them running to the city, they will refer back to their legal document that's filed of record that should be in their title search when they're buying the property, that tells them that they're responsible, not the city. And the only thing we can really do, if we're really, really concerned, is change our regulations so we don't allow private streets or such. And that reduces the flexibility to utilize properties in a certain way and in a more efficient manner to be able to develop the maximum number of lots and that kind of thing, because public streets take a lot more right-of-way and a lot more space, so you can't be as innovative if you don't ever allow private streets and those type of things.
That was the reason for creation of this, was to...
I don't know, that's what I would think, because if you put a public street in here, it needs right-of-way that's much greater than the width of this private drive.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
Nope.
Brian, I don't know if you have any ideas on this one, but I noted one of our conditions again was what I would say troublingly vague, where on number 4, where it said the applicant shall address all comments made in the city engineer's memorandum. As a clever attorney, I would certainly argue to somebody that addressing them does not mean coming to an agreement. And so I don't know what specifically what the city engineer's memorandum dated 6/4/14 contained, but that caused me to...
Yeah, and actually that's been raised before by other applicants as being somewhat of an odd condition they've never seen in other jurisdictions. And I guess and we haven't been doing that typically until recently, it was a way to try to address all the comment sheets we get from various agencies, and knowing that some of the private agencies, like the gas company and the telephone company, you're going to comply with their requirement or they won't give you their service. And so it was kind of stemmed from that requirement in a sense. This one here is more specific. It's actually saying the city engineer's comments. Well, sometimes their letters can be two pages long with all these conditions, and we didn't want to add all of those and just go through it again. So, and some of them are the type of requirements that are technical in nature that show up in the construction drawings, and they're almost exclusively that kind of conditions in the city engineer's letter. And so I'm kind of at a loss right now how we really deal with them.
I got it taken care of. Okay. Then Brent, did you have any comments on the gentleman's, Mr. Sissel's notes on 39?
No, I agree 100%. I told him, I was quite frank, that we got some assistance with this report, and we set an example, and we sent the wrong example that had the wrong wording instead of the correct wording, because we had corrected this at the last, at a previous meeting.
So should we amend it? Would that be appropriate with our code, or consistent with our code, to strike that whole thing, or should we modify it? I pulled up that section.
It's probably better to modify. Just all it is it's not actually needed. They need to follow the ordinance regardless, and we don't have to put every ordinance requirement in our conditions.
Okay.
And so we could strike it. It's just a processing condition that once they get approval for this, then they need to submit it within a year. I think that's...
Okay, I've got one for that. Okay. Is there any other questions for staff? Nope. Okay, we'll close the question portion and move just to deliberation. I had some ideas on this. I would propose that when we make a decision, we recognize staff's conclusion and do find that this was not infill. I think that there's a good point to have that. Mr. Surlett had a good point that lots 4 and 5 should be covered in some sort of a document, and I have some proposed language that could be used for that. It could be as a part of condition 28 that I would say something like a CC&R or maintenance agreement covering the private maintenance of the wall bordering lots 4 and 5 must be executed and filed with the city or recorded as appropriate, something along those lines. I was thinking that on the existing condition 28 that staff proposed, we should completely strike out the shall be clearly defined to the Planning Commission's satisfaction. Today, unless this is somehow appealed or be something else, today is our chance to review this. We're not going to see this thing again in a year, so we're not going to have a chance to be satisfied or dissatisfied in the future. So we need to have in there what we want today, what I proposed there. On 39, I would think that would be fine to just change that to the condition that the applicant complies with code 1668020 on their reporting. On 43, I thought we should strike the or as modified by the Planning Commission, because there hasn't been any discussion unless we do end up modifying it. And those were the thoughts that I had about this particular application and the staff proposed findings. Anybody else have any thoughts on this one? Concerns? Nope. Queries?
No, I think you got some good proposals there.
Oh, and that we modify the staff finding on page 9 to clarify that the outdoor lighting standard did not apply to street lighting. We replaced subdivisions where staff had written subdivisions, so we changed that to street lighting.
It's not applicable to street lighting, is right there.
Yeah, it currently says subdivisions, and we just clarify that a little bit to say to street lighting. That would be my thought. I haven't made a motion yet, because as chair, I'd prefer somebody else make the motions. Okay, is there any other discussion on these or thoughts? Anybody?
I'm trying to keep up with you here. I'm trying to make notes. So, okay, well, I can go with that. So, Mr. Chair, I propose that we approve the subdivision 14-03 Eli Estates with these changes on 16.43, substituting the word street lighting for subdivisions, striking subdivisions. Then on over on condition number 43, striking as modified by the Planning Commission. I think I'm keeping up here. And then on number 39, the subdivision plat must be recorded to Clackamas County within 1 year. Was that?
You strike the whole thing.
Strike the whole thing. Right.
Change the applicant comply with 16.68.020.
Exactly.
And add to 28.
Oh, back to 28. And then, okay, and then in addition to that, striking shall be clearly defined to the Planning Commission regarding landscaping.
This is what I wanted to propose, a CCNR or maintenance agreement covering the private maintenance of the wall bordering lots 4 and 5 must be executed and filed with the city and recorded as appropriate.
I think that that's wonderful, so why don't I just repeat that back?
That sounds good.
A CCR or maintenance agreement covering private maintenance of the wall bordering lots 4 and 5 must be executed and filed in the city and recorded as appropriate. I missed that one.
Oh, and I didn't discuss this one in discussion, so would it be too much to ask for your motion to also contain a striking of the address all comments and on condition number 4 to read the applicant shall resolve to the city engineer's reasonable satisfaction the comments made in the city engineer's memorandum?
No, that would not bother me at all.
Okay.
Chair, did we get all the proposals that you had noted there addressed?
Those were all the ones that I had mentioned in my commentary.
Okay, so it seemed like you had a number of them, to make sure we had them all covered before we...
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Mr.
based on
Shirley,
these
second.
changes.
Okay, any discussion on that? I appreciate your willingness to let me nitpick these things.
Nitpick away.
I think I'm crazy.
No, I do not. I think that you're a clever attorney, when necessary, and I sell office supplies.
Okay, not any other discussion, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of approving the subdivision 14.03 as it has, with the staff recommendations and staff findings as they've been modified by the Planning Commission, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All 4 were ayes. Is there any opposed? None were opposed. And is there any abstentions? None abstained. Okay, thank you. Good luck. Okay, the next item of business is to review the final decisions. First, on annexation 1401, zone change 1401. Does everyone on the commission had a chance to review the actual findings on those decisions that we had made in the last few months?
I have not, I've been out of town, so.
Okay.
Yes, have I, actually. So, that's right there.
I had a chance to review them, and they looked, matched up with my recollection of the reasons that we approved that one. Mr. Boatright, did you have any concerns, or did you get?
No, I just looked them over, thought it was, didn't really remember what we talked about.
It's a good practice to, at least until we approve the final findings, hang on to your notes in the staff report from prior decisions so that you can go back and reference, any notes you had or reasons why you made your decisions. So the findings, the actual written findings reflect the hard and fast reasons why we approved or denied anything. Well, I definitely remember this being the findings that staff has prepared for us, the formal findings being in line with what we had decided. So I would move to approve the final findings and ask for the commission to authorize me to sign that as the final findings.
I will second that.
Is there any discussion on that, or nobody had any concerns? Okay. Mr. Boatright, you're reading. Do you want me to give you a minute more to?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So with that, all those in favor of approving the findings as presented today?